Her own father gave her away to an Apache warrior, ashamed of the scars the fire left on her face. But that man, forged by pain, saw beauty where no one else did, and taught her that true love blossoms from the deepest wounds. Subscribe to the channel and listen to this beautiful story. The sun was setting behind the arid mountains as flames engulfed the east wing of Oakwood Ranch. The wind howled strong on that July night in 1847, carrying the smell of burning wood and the desperate cry of Isadora Vance. "Ethan! Ethan! Where are you?" She ran through the blazing corridors, her linen dress tearing on loose nails in the doors. The heat seared her skin, but her green eyes sought only one thing, her younger brother, who had drunk too much and vanished during dinner. The fire roared like a wild animal, devouring everything in its path. She found Ethan unconscious in the back room, his body sprawled on the bed, a broken whiskey bottle on the floor. The fire was already licking at the curtains. Without hesitation, Isadora grabbed him by the arms and dragged him out. The ceiling beams crashed down behind them. A tongue of flame leaped out and touched her face, her shoulder, her soul. The scream that escaped her throat echoed throughout the entire ranch. 3 days later, Isadora awoke with half her face covered in blood-soaked bandages. Eleanor Vance was sitting in the chair beside the bed, but her eyes showed no relief. They showed horror. "My daughter," her mother murmured. "You saved Ethan." But Isadora raised a trembling hand to her face. She felt the rough bandages, the sweet scent of ointments, the stretched, different skin. She didn't need a mirror to know. She saw everything in Eleanor Vance's eyes. "I brought a mirror," her mother said, hesitant. "I don't need one." Isadora turned her face to the wall. The room fell silent, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the dresser. Outside, life on the ranch continued. But for her, everything had stopped in those 3 days. The following weeks passed like a slow nightmare. Servants lowered their eyes when she passed. Friends who used to come for tea stopped appearing. Suitors who courted Colonel Thomas Vance's daughter simply vanished like smoke in the wind. Ethan, recovered and more arrogant than ever, showed no gratitude. On the contrary. "You should have let me die," he said one afternoon when he found her embroidering on the porch. "It would have been less of an embarrassment for all of us." Isadora plunged the needle forcefully into the fabric. She didn't answer. She had already learned that words couldn't heal certain wounds. Colonel Thomas, a man of business and appearances, felt the weight of society's gaze. The daughter who was once the family's pride was now a constant reminder of something he preferred to forget. When Major Harrison Reed appeared at his ranch with a proposal, the colonel saw the opportunity he had been waiting for. "I have an Apache prisoner," the major explained, drinking brandy in the living room. "A brave warrior, but rebellious. We captured him after he attacked a military carriage passing through lands that once belonged to his tribe. The government wants to make a deal, a union that will serve as an example for other tribes." Thomas frowned. "What kind of union?" "Marriage. A white woman with an indigenous man. It shows the government is merciful, and it solves problems for all of us." The colonel looked out the window, where Isadora was sewing alone. "And what problems do you imagine I have? I heard about the accident. I'm very sorry, but perhaps it's an opportunity for her and for you." Thomas felt a knot in his stomach but said nothing. The major continued, "The Apache's name is Nathaniel. It means he who fights. The soldiers call him Silent Heart because he never speaks. He is strong, honorable, but dangerous if not controlled. A wife could domesticate him. And my daughter, she would be well treated. The government would ensure that, and you would be free to rebuild other things." Thomas knew exactly what the major meant. Free to marry Ethan to someone important. Free to receive visitors without embarrassment. Free from the daughter who had become a burden. That night, Thomas called Isadora to his study. She entered with her head bowed, her hands clasped in front of her body. The colonel couldn't look directly at her. "We've received a proposal," he said, shuffling papers on his desk. "The government needs a woman to marry an Apache prisoner. It's a political matter." Isadora looked up, surprised. "And what does that have to do with me?" "You would be that woman." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Isadora felt the ground move beneath her feet. "I would be given away. It would be an opportunity to start a new life, far, far from here." She understood. Far from pitying glances, far from the shame she represented, far from the family that could no longer bear to see her. "What if I say no?" Thomas finally faced her. His eyes were cold, determined. "It's not a question, Isadora. It's information." She nodded slowly. She had always known this day would come. From the moment she awoke with her face burned, she knew she would no longer belong in that place. "When do I leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn. A detachment will come for you." Isadora stood up and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "Father, yes, I saved Ethan because I loved him, but I will never save anyone from this family again." The door closed with a soft click. Thomas was left alone, with the weight of his choices and the bitter taste of brandy in his mouth. The following dawn, Isadora packed her few clothes in a leather trunk. She took the bottle of lavender oil she used to care for her scars, a letter she had written to herself but never sent, and the porcelain doll she had received at 7. Nothing else. Eleanor Vance appeared at the bedroom door. The two looked at each other in silence. There were no words for that moment. "Mother," Isadora said, "was I ever your daughter?" Eleanor opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Isadora picked up the trunk and walked past her without waiting for an answer. The military detachment was in front of the house, 5 mounted soldiers, an officer, and a simple wagon to carry her belongings. Major Reed was there, elegant and smiling as if they were going on a picnic. "Miss Isadora, I hope you are prepared for a new adventure." She climbed into the wagon without looking back. As they pulled away from Oakwood Ranch, she felt a pain in her chest that had nothing to do with the burns. It was the pain of being discarded, of being considered trash by her own family. The journey lasted 3 days, through arid lands and rocky mountains. They were heading to Apache territory, on the border between Mexico and the United States, a hostile region marked by constant conflicts and tense negotiations between military and indigenous tribes. On the way, the major explained the situation. "The Apache you're going to meet lost his family in a recent conflict. He's been imprisoned for 6 months. He's a respected warrior among his people, but now he's, broken. The marriage is part of a peace agreement. He gets a companion, you get protection, and the government gets control. And what happens if he rejects me? That won't happen. He has no choice, just like you." Isadora looked at the arid landscape stretching around them. Cacti, reddish rocks, distant mountains that looked like cuts in the sky's skin. It was a place that perfectly matched how she felt inside, empty, wounded, but still standing. On the 3rd day, they arrived at the military encampment. It was a temporary place, surrounded by wooden stakes and guarded by armed soldiers. In the center, there were a few tents and a simple adobe structure where the prisoners were kept. "He's there," the major said, pointing to the building. "Nathaniel, the Silent Heart." Isadora got out of the wagon and followed the major to the door. Her heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was a strange beat, as if something inside her was awakening. The major opened the door and she entered. The man had his back to her, looking out the small barred window. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair tied back with a leather strip. He wore simple clothes, but there was a dignity in his posture that no prison had managed to break. "Nathaniel," the major said, "I've brought your wife." The Apache turned slowly. Isadora saw eyes as dark as night, a face marked by war scars, but still young. He looked her up and down, pausing on the burned side of her face. There was no scorn in his eyes, only a calculated coolness. "The white people give me what they themselves discarded," he said in heavily accented English. "I don't need a woman her own family rejected." The words cut like a knife, but Isadora didn't lower her eyes. Something inside her refused to bow. "I didn't ask to be here either," she replied firmly, "but I won't be anyone's trash, not my family's and not yours." The Apache stared at her for a long moment. A different light passed through his eyes, as if something in her had surprised him. "What's your name?" "Isadora." "Isadora," he repeated, trying the sound on his tongue. "I am Nathaniel, but my people call me another name now." "What?" "Silent Heart." "Why?" He turned back to the window. "Because when you lose everything you love, words die inside you." The Major clapped his hands, interrupting the moment. "Excellent, you're already talking. The ceremony will be tomorrow morning. After that, you'll be transferred to a house near the reservation. A new beginning for everyone." He left, leaving them alone. Isadora stood in the middle of the room, unsure what to do or say. Nathaniel continued to look out the window, as if she didn't exist. "Where will I sleep?" she asked. "There's a bed in the next room. I sleep on the floor." "You don't have to. I can sleep on the floor." He turned again, studying her with curiosity. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not your prisoner. I'm just another person who's here against their will." Nathaniel walked up to her and stopped very close. Isadora smelled leather and wild herbs. He raised his hand and almost touched her burned face, but stopped in the air. "The fire marked you," he said softly. "Yes." "Why?" "I saved my brother." "And he thanked you?" Isadora smiled bitterly. "He said I should have let him die." Nathaniel lowered his hand. "Families can be crueler than enemies." "Was yours too?" A shadow passed across his eyes. "My family died defending our land. They were brave to their last breath." Isadora felt a pang of envy. It must be good to have a family worth dying for. "It is, and it's also terrible." They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky red and orange. The colors reflected in the small window, creating patterns on the adobe wall. "Isadora," Nathaniel said. "Yes? Tomorrow, when we marry, it won't be a real marriage. It will just be a piece of paper the white people want us to sign. Do you understand that?" "I understand. But if you want respect, you'll have respect. If you want protection, you'll have protection. If you want silence, you'll have silence. And if I want to leave," he hesitated before answering, "then you'll have to wait, because neither you nor I are free now." Isadora nodded. She understood that, for the first time in months, someone was being completely honest with her. There were no false promises, no feigned pity, just the naked, raw truth. "Nathaniel?" "Yes?" "Why did the soldiers capture you?" "Because they attacked a carriage passing through the lands where my wife and child are buried. Lands that were ours for generations." "Did you kill them?" "No, I just stopped them from passing." "Then why are you here?" His eyes turned hard as stone. "Because to the white people, an Indian who defends himself is always a criminal." Isadora understood. They were two exiles, two people the world had decided were worthless. She because she was disfigured, he because he was Apache. Perhaps together they could find a way to survive the world's contempt. When the moon rose high and silver, they were still talking. For the first time in months, Isadora didn't feel completely alone. The ceremony took place at dawn, without flowers, without music, without joy. Just a military judge, two soldiers as witnesses, and the cold words of the law. Isadora wore a simple blue cotton dress, the only one she had brought that didn't smell of smoke. Nathaniel wore thick cloth military-issued clothes, but he kept the necklace of beads and feathers that had belonged to his grandfather. "Do you swear to live as husband and wife before the law of the territory?" the judge asked, flipping through papers as if they were receipts. "Yes," Isadora said. Nathaniel merely nodded. "You may kiss." They looked at each other. Nathaniel approached slowly and lightly touched her lips with his. It was a respectful touch, without passion, but also without coldness. When they pulled apart, Isadora saw something different in his eyes. Perhaps it was determination. "Congratulations!" Major Reed clapped his hands. "You are now officially married. Your new home is 2 leagues from here, near the river, an isolated place perfect for getting to know each other better." The house was small, made of adobe and wood, with 2 rooms, a simple kitchen, and a well in the yard. It stood in a clearing surrounded by mesquite trees and cacti, with the purple mountains in the background. The silence of the place was profound, broken only by the wind and the distant song of a bird. "Is this where we'll live?" Isadora asked, looking around. "For now," Nathaniel replied, "until they decide what to do with us." In the first few days they lived like polite strangers. He slept on a makeshift bed in the living room, she in the small bedroom. He hunted and brought food, she cooked and kept the house clean. They spoke little, but there was a cautious courtesy between them. Isadora discovered that Nathaniel woke before the sun and sat in the yard, looking east, whispering words in his native tongue. When she asked what he was doing, he explained, "I speak with my family. I tell them where I am. I ask for guidance for the day." Do they answer? The wind brings messages. Shadows show paths. You just need to know how to listen. She began to sit beside him during these silent mornings. She didn't understand the words he spoke, but she felt the reverence, the deep connection to something greater than both of them. It was different from any prayer she had known in church. One morning, while Nathaniel was out hunting, Isadora heard shouts coming from the river. She ran in the direction of the sound and found an Apache girl of about 12, struggling against the current, clearly drowning. Without thinking, Isadora jumped into the cold water and pulled the child to the bank. The girl was scared and spoke quickly in Apache, pointing to Isadora's burned face with curiosity, not fear. When Nathaniel returned and found them sitting together, the girl drying in the sun while Isadora combed her hair, he stopped and watched them for a long moment. "This is Ayana," he said. "It means eternal flower. She is the niece of our tribe's chief. She was drowning, and you saved her." "Anyone would do that." Nathaniel knelt beside them. "No, not just anyone, and certainly not someone who is here against their will." Ayana said something in Apache, gently touching the scars on Isadora's face. Nathaniel translated. "She said your marks are like the sacred designs we make on our skin during rituals, that the fire chose you for something special." Isadora felt tears in her eyes. "Tell her she's the first person who sees beauty in these marks." When Nathaniel translated, Ayana smiled and hugged Isadora tightly. In that moment something changed. An invisible wall between Isadora and that new world began to crumble. Ayana returned in the following days, bringing other children from the tribe. They played in the yard while Isadora sewed or cooked, and little by little she began to learn words in Apache. The children called her Ista, which meant Mother of the Heart. "So, why do they call me that?" she asked Nathaniel one night as they ate rabbit stew for dinner. "Because you care without expecting anything in return. Among us, that is being a mother, even without your own children." One afternoon, Isadora was gathering herbs near the river when she slipped and cut her hand on a sharp rock. The cut was deep and bled profusely. When she managed to get back to the house, Nathaniel found her pale and trembling. Without a word, he made her sit down and examined the wound. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the blood. Then he went to his belongings and returned with a small leather pouch full of dried herbs. "This will sting," he warned. Before applying the green powder to the wound, Isadora bit her lip but didn't scream. He bandaged her hand with strips of clean cloth, his movements careful and precise. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. "My mother was a healer. She said caring for the wounded was a sacred gift. And you have that gift?" He stopped tying the bandage and looked at her. "I'm still finding out." That night, Isadora had a fever. Nathaniel made willow bark tea and stayed by her bed, changing cool cloths on her forehead. When she was delirious, talking to people who weren't there, he held her hand and whispered in Apache, words that sounded like a lullaby. She woke up the next morning and found him sleeping in the chair beside the bed, still holding her bandaged hand. "Natanya," she murmured. He awoke immediately, alert. "How do you feel?" "Better. Thank you for taking care of me. You did the same for the girl in the river." "That's different." "Why?" Because you owe me nothing." He was silent for a moment, then said, "Among my people, when someone saves a life, a bond is created. You saved Ayana. Now, she is your responsibility. And you are hers. And between us?" "Between us?" He hesitated. "Between us, I am still finding out." The weeks passed, and their coexistence became more natural. They shared tasks, stories, and comfortable silences. Isadora learned to prepare remedies with the herbs Natanya collected. He learned to like the small corn cakes she made on Sundays. When she had nightmares about the fire, he stayed awake in the living room until he was sure she was sleeping peacefully. When he spent hours looking at the mountains with distant eyes, lost in painful memories, she prepared tea and sat beside him, asking nothing. One evening, as they were preparing dinner together, Isadora asked about the family he had lost. What were they like? Natanya stopped cutting the meat and became still. Isadora thought he wouldn't answer, but after a long silence he said, "My wife's name was Kiona. It means Golden Hill. She laughed at everything, even sad things. She said laughter was medicine that never ran out." "And your son?" "Ilan." "Friendly. He was 6 years old. He liked to chase lizards and ask questions I couldn't answer." How did they die?" "Soldiers attacked our village while I was hunting. They said we were a threat. Kiona tried to protect Ilan, but..." He stopped and clenched his fists. "When I returned, it was too late." Isadora gently touched his arm. "I'm sorry. I should have been there. Maybe. Or maybe you would have died too, and then they would have died alone." Natanya looked at her, surprised by the answer. "You don't understand. A warrior protects his family. It's his only function. And who protects the warrior?" The question caught him off guard. He had no answer. "Natanya," Isadora said, "you cannot save those who are already gone, but you can honor their memory by saving those who are still here." That night, for the first time since they met, they stayed up talking until dawn. Not about the past or the future, but about small things, the taste of the well water, the shape of the clouds, the stories the stars told. When the sun rose, Isadora realized that something fundamental had changed between them. It wasn't love yet, but it was trust. And perhaps, for two broken people like them, trust was the first step towards something greater. But the peace they had built was about to be tested. At the end of the second month, Major Reed appeared with news that would change everything. "We have a problem," he said, dismounting his horse with a serious expression. "Natanya's tribe is organizing. They want him back. And there are rumors that Isadora's family is questioning the agreement." Isadora felt her blood run cold. "My family? Your brother Ethan is saying you were given away against your will, that he wants to annul the marriage and take you back." "That's a lie." "It might be, but it's causing political problems. The government needs this marriage to work as an example. If it fails..." "What happens if it fails?" Natanya asked. The major looked at them seriously. "You go back to prison, and she goes back to her family, for the rest of your life." Isadora and Natanya looked at each other. In that moment, they realized they were fighting not just for their peace, but for their freedom, and that they would have to decide once and for all whether they wanted to fight together or alone. "How much time do we have?" Isadora asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. After that, orders come from above, and I won't be able to do anything." When the major left, they stood in silence in the yard, looking at the mountains that had already begun to feel like home. "What do you want to do?" Natanya asked. "I don't know. And you?" "I don't know either." He hesitated, then added, "But I know I don't want you to be forced back to people who treat you like trash. And I don't want you to be imprisoned because of me." They looked at each other. And for the first time, Isadora saw something in his eyes that wasn't just respect or courtesy. It was true protection, real. "Isadora," he said, "if we stay together, it won't be because we're obligated. It will be because we choose to. And if we choose to, then we'll have to fight to protect that choice." She nodded. For the first time in her life, someone was asking what she wanted. Not what was best for the family, not what was convenient for others. What she, Isadora, truly wanted. And she discovered that she wanted to stay. "Then let's fight," she said. Nathaniel smiled. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile, and it was like seeing the sun rise after a long night. But neither of them imagined that the fight would be harder and more dangerous than they could imagine, and that secrets from the past were about to surface, changing everything they thought they knew about their own stories. The storm arrived on a September morning, not a storm of rain, but of horses, weapons, and furious voices. Isadora was in the yard preparing remedies when she heard the sound of hooves approaching. Nathaniel, who was repairing the roof, quickly descended and stood beside her. A group of 10 armed men appeared in the clearing. At the front, mounted on a bay horse, rode Ethan Vance, more arrogant and well-dressed than ever. Behind him, soldiers and henchmen, all with rifles in their hands. "My dear little sister," Ethan said, dismounting his horse with a fake smile, "I've come to get you." "Don't call me that," Isadora replied, her voice firm. "And I didn't come to be gotten." "Oh, but I don't think you understand the situation." Ethan signaled and the men spread out around the house. "You were given here against your will. That makes the marriage invalid. Father sent legal documents." Nathaniel stepped forward. "She's not going anywhere." Well, well, the savage speaks." Ethan laughed cruelly. "You have no rights here, Indian. You're just a borrowed prisoner." "I'm no one's prisoner," Nathaniel said, his hand instinctively moving to the knife he carried on his belt. "Actually, you are." Ethan pulled a paper from his pocket. "I have here an arrest warrant for you, for the attack on the military carriage. The penalty is death." Isadora felt the ground move beneath her feet. "That's a lie. He didn't kill anyone." "It doesn't matter what he did or didn't do," Ethan said. "What matters is what I can prove. And I have witnesses who will say anything I tell them to." It was then that Isadora understood the truth. Ethan hadn't come to save her. He had come to destroy the peace she had found. He couldn't bear to see her happy while he lived, tormented by shame and remorse. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan's face contorted into an expression of hatred. "Because you saved me. Because now I have to live with the weight of owing you my life. Because every time I look in the mirror, I see your scars and remember that I should have died in that fire." "So that's it," Isadora murmured. "You want to drag me back so I can suffer with you. I want you to be what you always were, an obedient daughter who doesn't cause problems." Nathaniel moved closer to Isadora. "She's not coming with you." "And how will you stop me?" Ethan scoffed. "Alone against 10 armed men." It was then that the sound of other horses echoed through the morning. A group of Apache warriors emerged from the trees, led by a tall, imposing man with grey hair. It was Cochise, the tribal chief. "Nathaniel," the chief said in Apache, then repeated in English, "My nephew, I have come for you." "Uncle," Nathaniel replied, surprised. "How did you find me?" "The children told me about the woman with fire marks who cares for them, about how you two live in peace." Cochise looked at Isadora with interest. "Is this her?" "It is." The chief studied Isadora for a long moment, then said something in Apache that made Nathaniel's eyes widen. "What did he say?" Ethan asked, nervous about the arrival of the Apache. Nathaniel translated, his voice full of amazement. "He said he had a vision, that a woman marked by fire would come to our family, and that this woman would bring healing to a silent heart." Cochise approached Isadora and gently touched her scars. "The fire chose you," he said in halting English. "It made you strong. It made you ours." Ethan was growing desperate. "This doesn't matter. She's a white citizen and I have legal documents." "Your documents are worthless here," Cochise said with authority. "This is Apache land, and this woman saved our child. Now she is our kin. And I have an arrest warrant against him," Ethan shouted, pointing at Nathaniel. It was then that someone spoke from behind the trees in a voice Isadora immediately recognized. "That warrant is fake." Major Harrison Reed emerged from the woods, but he wasn't alone. With him came Colonel Thomas Vance, Isadora's father. "Father?" Isadora murmured, confused. Thomas was changed. He looked older, more tired, with a deep sadness in his eyes. "My daughter," he said, his voice broken, "I came to ask for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness for what?" "For believing your brother's lies, for giving you away as if you were an object." Ethan paled. "Father, what are you doing here? Discovering the truth you tried to hide." Thomas looked at his son with contempt. "He forged the arrest warrant, Isadora, and I found out why." Major Reed spoke. "Your brother has enormous gambling debts. He needed quick money. The plan was to bring you back, marry you to a wealthy American colonel who has an interest in lands in Brazil." "That's a lie," Ethan shouted. "It's true," Thomas said, pulling papers from his pocket. "I found the contracts on your desk. You had already sold your sister to this man before she was even born." Isadora felt a rage burn within her chest, like she had never felt before. All the years of humiliation, of feeling worthless, of silently accepting contempt, all because Ethan wanted to use her as a bargaining chip. "All these years," she said, her voice rising, "you made me believe I had no worth, that I was a burden, but in truth I always had worth. It just wasn't for you." She turned to Nathaniel, who was looking at her with pride and admiration. "Nathaniel," she said, "you asked me what I wanted. I want to stay here. I want to be your wife for real. I want to care for the tribe's children. I want to learn your language, your customs, your medicine. And I want to teach you all of that," he replied, taking her hands. "I want you to know that you are valuable, strong, beautiful. I want to wake up every day knowing that we built our life together, by our choice." Ethan, desperate, drew his pistol. "She's coming with me, whether she wants to or not." But before he could aim the weapon, Nathaniel moved like lightning. In seconds, Ethan was on the ground, disarmed and immobilized. "Your time is up," Nathaniel said, his voice low and dangerous. Cochise approached and said something in Apache. Nathaniel translated, "My uncle says you have two choices. You can leave now and never return, or you can stay and face Apache justice for trying to kidnap a member of our family." Ethan looked around and saw that his men had lowered their weapons before the Apache warriors. He was defeated. "This isn't over," he snarled, getting up. "Yes, it is," Thomas said, his voice tired. "Ethan, you are no longer my son. I will disinherit you and cut all ties. You made your choices, now live with them." Ethan looked at everyone with hatred, then mounted his horse and galloped away, his men scrambling after him. Thomas approached Isadora. "My daughter, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it when you needed it most." Isadora looked at her father. It still hurt. It would always hurt. But she was no longer that broken girl who had left the ranch. "Father," she said, "all my life I sought your approval, but now I've discovered that the only approval that matters is my own." Thomas nodded, tears in his eyes. "You are right. And I am proud of the woman you've become." He turned to Nathaniel. "Take care of her. She is more precious than gold." "I know," Nathaniel replied, "and she will take care of me, too." Cochise approached the two. "Nathaniel, do you want to return to the tribe?" "I want Isadora to choose. I choose to stay where I can help," she said. "If the tribe accepts me, I want to learn to be a healer. I want to use my scars to teach others that wounds can strengthen us." Cochise smiled. "Then welcome to the family." The sun rose golden over the mountains when Isadora awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Itzel humming in the yard. The house had grown much larger since those tense first days. Now it had 6 bedrooms, a fully equipped healing office, a library with books on traditional medicine in 3 languages, and the most respected medicinal herb garden in the entire border region. Isadora, known for leagues around as Istanalnish, the healer who transforms, received people from all tribes, Mexican traders, American settlers, and even white doctors who came to learn her healing techniques. Her home had become a neutral ground where racial and cultural differences dissolved before the human need to heal and be healed. Her face still bore the marks of the fire, but now they looked like sacred designs painted by divine hands. Her green eyes shone with profound wisdom. Her voice was firm when healing, sweet when comforting. Her black hair, which she once hid behind bandages and veils, was now always braided with small wildflowers that Itzel gathered every morning. Natanye, who was never again called Silent Heart, became Nalnish Be, he who heals through the word. He worked as a mediator between 3 different governments, Apache, Mexican, and American, resolving conflicts that seemed impossible. His honor was legendary, his wisdom sought by chiefs and generals, but his greatest joy was in the family he had built and the small healing village that had grown around his home. In the blooming yard, several children played. Ayana, now 17, had become a skilled healer, specializing in childbirth and caring for wounded women. She used her own scars, marks of ancient violence, as bridges to reach other victims. Beside her played Itzel, who at 3 years old already spoke 3 languages and knew more about medicinal plants than many adults. The girl had her mother's clear green eyes and her father's silky black hair. But her greatest inheritance was her natural ability to make anyone feel loved and accepted. Apache children followed her like little birds, and even the toughest soldiers melted when she smiled. "Mama Ista!" Itzel shouted, running to Isadora with a small turtle in her hands. "I found a hurt turtle. Can we heal it?" "Of course we can," Isadora said, kneeling to examine the small animal. "What kind of injury do you think it has?" Itzel studied the turtle with professional seriousness. "I think someone stepped on its shell. Can we use the calendula ointment? Very well thought out. Go get it while I prepare a safe place for it to recover." As Itzel ran to get the medicine, Isadora smiled. The girl had inherited not only her appearance, but her instinctive compassion for all wounded beings. That morning, 3 different visitors arrived. First, a pregnant young Mexican woman who had lost 4 babies and was desperate. Ayana received her warmly and took her to the special room for pregnant women, where she would spend the next few weeks under special care. Then, an American soldier who had lost his leg in battle and now faced phantom pains that no military doctor could cure. Natanye talked at length with him about loss, acceptance, and how to transform physical pain into spiritual strength. The third visitor was the most unexpected. Colonel Thomas Vance, riding alone, his face marked by years and regrets. "Father," Isadora said, surprised, stepping out to greet him in the yard. Thomas dismounted slowly, as if every movement hurt. He seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 5. "My daughter, I hope you'll allow me to stay a few days." "Well, you're always welcome here," she replied, embracing him. "What brings you to these lands?" "I came to meet my granddaughter, and to see with my own eyes the extraordinary woman you've become." During dinner, Thomas watched in amazement how the household functioned. Isadora translated conversations between a German merchant and an Apache healer. Natanye mediated a discussion between 2 Mexican cowboys about the use of a well. Ayana taught a young mother how to prepare tea for her baby's colic, and Itzel circulated among everyone, offering hugs and smiles that seemed to heal invisible wounds. "How do you manage this?" Thomas asked, impressed. "People from so many different cultures living in peace." "Pain has no color, Father," Isadora replied. "When you treat the wound, it doesn't matter the skin color that carries it. And when people feel truly healed, they learn to heal others." That night, after everyone was asleep, Thomas sat with Isadora in the yard. The stars shone intensely in the clear desert sky. "Isadora," he said, his voice choked, "I need you to know something. After you left, your mother fell ill with sadness. In the last months of her life, she repeated your name and asked for forgiveness. She died whispering that you were the bravest daughter she could have had." Tears streamed down Isadora's face. "She really said that?" "She did. And she made me promise to come here to see if you were well, to tell you that she loved you, even when she didn't know how to show it. And Ethan," Thomas sighed heavily, "your brother lost everything gambling. He's living as a henchman for landowners, drinking and destroying himself. Some people are born with demons inside them, daughter. You were born with angels." The next day, Thomas helped in the herb garden, talked at length with Nathaniel about politics and land, and was completely charmed by Itzel, who convinced him to give her piggyback rides. "Grandpa," the girl said, tugging his grey beard, "can you stay forever?" "I'd love to, my dear, but I have responsibilities back home." "Then can you always come back?" "Whenever I can." Before leaving, Thomas handed Isadora a wooden box. "What is this?" she asked. "Your childhood things. Your drawings, your first dolls, letters you wrote but never sent. Your mother kept everything." Isadora opened the box and found forgotten treasures. A drawing of her at 5 where the whole family smiled, a rag doll she adored, and a letter she had written at 12 dreaming of being a nurse. "Thank you, Father, for bringing this, and for coming." Thomas hugged her tightly. "Thank you for forgiving me, and for becoming the woman I always dreamed you'd be." When he left, he promised to return every year, and he kept his promise. In the months that followed, the reputation of Ista's healing house spread even further. A German settler family arrived whose son had a spinal deformity, a group of runaway former slaves who needed shelter and treatment, a delegation of Navajo women who wanted to learn Isadora's special techniques for treating burns. The small village around the house grew. Cabins were built for long-term guests, a school where Ayana taught traditional medicine, a stable for visitors' horses, and even a small chapel where ceremonies of different religions were held. Isadora and Nathaniel became living legends. Stories about them were told around campfires from Texas to Sonora. The couple who turned scars into blessings, the firewoman who heals with love, the silent warrior who learned to speak with his heart. No, but for them, the greatest joy was in the small moments. Nathaniel teaching Itzel to track animals, Isadora braiding Ayana's hair while they talked about boys and dreams. The 3 generations of women, Isadora, Ayana, and Itzel, preparing remedies together, each learning from the others. One afternoon, while organizing her medical journals, Isadora found the letter she had written to herself on her first day in the house 5 years earlier. It was yellowed and folded, but the words were still clear. "If I ever read this again, I hope it's because I survived, that I found a way to turn this pain into something useful, that I learned my worth isn't in my appearance, but in my ability to love and be loved." She smiled, picked up a quill, and added, 5 years later I survived, I transformed, I learned, and I discovered that true love doesn't just heal scars, it turns them into works of art. That night, during dinner, Nathaniel made a special announcement. "Ista, my heart, I want everyone to know something." He stood up and took her hands. 5 years ago, the white people gave me a woman they considered broken. Today, she gave me a life I didn't even know was possible. "And 5 years ago," Isadora replied, standing too, "they gave me to a man I was supposed to fear. But he taught me that true love doesn't fix, it accepts, protects, and celebrates." Everyone present, about 20 people from different backgrounds, applauded. Itzel climbed onto a chair and shouted, "Mommy and Daddy are the best in the whole wide world." Ayana laughed. Thomas, who had returned for a second visit, cried with pride, and even the most reserved guests smiled. Later, when the house finally quieted and only the couple remained awake in the yard, Isadora said, "Nathaniel, sometimes I'm afraid this is a dream." "Why?" "Because it's too good to be true. A woman rejected by her own family, finding so much love, so much purpose. He gently touched her scars. You know what my grandfather used to say? That the spirits send us exactly the lessons we need to learn. They sent you the fire to teach you that you are stronger than anything that can hurt you. They sent me you to teach me that a heart can be broken and then become bigger than it was before. And what did we learn together? That true love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone perfect for you. Isadora nestled in his arms, looking at the stars that seemed to dance in the infinite sky. Natanye? When I was little, I used to look at the stars and make wishes. I wished to be beautiful, to be loved, to be special. And now? Now I look at the stars and give thanks, because I discovered that I was always beautiful to those who knew how to see. I was always loved by those who deserved to love. And I was always special, just not in the way I imagined. He kissed the top of her head. You are the answer to prayers I didn't even know I was making. And so, under the starry cloak of the desert, two souls who were once broken and rejected silently celebrated the extraordinary life they had built together.